Aaron Murphy is with us now. He's a commercial pilot. He's also a flight instructor at UFly in Canada. And he's in a flight simulator now with his colleague Claudio Textera flying the simulator. So, Erin, you hear Rebecca talk about the heroism of those pilots and what they did in those milliseconds when they realized something was there and tried everything they could to slow that plane down. Probably in those last seconds, knowing that it wouldn't matter for them, but maybe it would for people in the back of the plane. You also heard her talk about that final approach and the turbulence, the bounciness that they were coming in with. What is that approach into LaGuardia like, and what would those pilots have seen as they came in for that very late night landing?
Erin, it's great to be on the show. Thanks. Under circumstances, I'd rather we were not on the show, but I think it's important that we share our equipment here at UFly Simulator in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, so the rest of the world can see why these things happen. We can try to explain that as best we can. And immediately off the top, my deepest condolences to Antoine and Mackenzie and their friends and family. I woke up this morning. I had several text messages from friends that said, "What's going on in LaGuardia? Why is there a fire truck on the runway?" And I get out of my morning fog and I look at the news, and I wished it was a movie. It was just astounding. And second, but equal to the top spot, thank you to the emergency responders. And that might sound a little bit strange to say that, but the emergency responders were responding to an emergency on the airfield in LaGuardia when the collision occurred. And I'm going to make a recommendation for that momentarily. And of course, Claudio Textera, the owner and a flight instructor at UFly Simulator, he will be flying us into LaGuardia. We are set up on runway 4 right now on the approach. And we're gonna head in there, Erin, whenever you're ready for us to do that.
Yeah, go ahead and show us what happens.
Okay. Claudia, we're ready to go. All right, I'm going to pause the sim. Unfreezing the sim. I'll just give you some color commentary here. It is nighttime as it was. It's dark like last night. We're coming into land 04, and the visibility was about 4 or 5 miles. There were some low clouds and rain, so visibility is an issue for sure. Windshield wipers are going. And off to the left side of the runway, there's an accumulation of emergency vehicles because of the other aircraft emergency at the time. We're just coming in over the threshold now. Claudia's doing an amazing job on the PAPI lights here. You can see them on the right side. We're touching down, and Delta Taxiway is about halfway down the runway. I don't know if this helps, but we're going to be somewhere about halfway down the runway here. Right about here, the fire truck pulls out, and I would expect that the flight crew saw it maybe at the last second as it pulled out. And on the video that you're showing, I can actually see the fire truck turning slightly or more than slightly to the left, because I think they saw that aircraft at the very last second as they plowed right into it.
So when Rebecca talks about that grinding noise, and that it felt like there was that extra braking, okay, that she felt in those last milliseconds, right? Then just thrown forward, obviously, by the force of the collision. Does anything stand out to you by what she described there?
Yeah, most of the modern aircraft have braking, anti-skid braking, so the pilots would be into the brakes as hard as they can be, and the anti-skid would have definitely been working its magic. But you have a wet runway, you have rainy conditions, poor visibility as you're landing, the windshield wipers are going. There's a lot of different factors on this accident, as there always are. They may even have tried to swerve to avoid the fire truck, but inputting the rudder for a right or left turn on the wet runway with the brakes on, it might have just continued to skid forward and right into the truck. There was really, I don't think there was any way for the pilots to avoid that. It was so last second.
Yes, and you talk about the role of clouds and visibility coming in, the windshield wipers, and then the wet runway itself. The video that we showed of the moment that the plane collides with the fire truck, that's the surveillance video that we now have. And the speed here on the plane is more than 100 miles an hour as it plows through. I suppose what you're saying is, given the wet runway, there was nothing they could have done. I mean, even with a dry runway, is there anything at that speed with something right there that they could have possibly done, even in a perfect daylight scenario?
We could what if this to death, and I think at the end of the day, we can't have emergency vehicles running onto the runway at all. And I'd like to make a recommendation to everyone who's watching. I've spent my time at racetracks around Southern Ontario, and if we can borrow something from the racetrack, when you have a red flag at the racetrack, there's one thing every driver does. They either head to the nearest marshal station or they leave the track as fast as possible because they know somebody on the track is possibly injured and needing medical assistance. If we could have a red flag procedure, let's call it the Antoine and Mackenzie red flag procedure in memory of this accident in LaGuardia, where when there is an emergency aircraft on the field, as I believe the United was having an emergency, it was declared, the aircraft must stop operations and have any aircraft on the approach go missed approach. The Air Canada would have gone missed, or the Jazz would have gone missed. It's the same thing, really. And they would have been on the downwind. The fire truck is across. Nothing happens. Nothing happens.
Some airports has also tunnels.
All right. Well, thank you both
Sorry,
so
continue.
very much. No, thank you so much.
Thanks for
I
having us.
appreciate it. We all do, and for showing that. Rebecca Liquori is out front. She was a passenger on that Air Canada flight and was just discharged from the hospital. Rebecca, I was saying to you, I don't know some of the things, in that you haven't even yet seen from that perspective because you were there on the inside of that plane. Thank God you're okay.
I thank God that I'm okay.
How are you even feeling right now?
I'm just grateful to be alive. I'm grateful that I was able to go home and kiss my sons, be able to hug them, because when I was on the plane, I didn't think that I was ever going to get that opportunity again.
I know you were going to you were a godmother, so
Yes.
you were going to see a new baby, a flight back and forth that you had done countless times.
Yes.
So when you're coming in for landing, at what point did you realize something was actually wrong? You've touched down, right? And then what?
So the flight, for the majority, was smooth. It wasn't until we started descending and the flight attendant said, in case of an emergency landing, don't grab your luggage. And everybody was kind of looking around like, that's strange. And then as we were descending, the plane started to experience turbulence. And she said the pilot wants everyone to keep their seatbelts on because of the turbulence.
Yeah.
And we hit a very rough landing. It almost felt like the plane jolted. And after that, you hear the pilot try to brake, and it was like a grinding noise. And then after that, it was a huge just boom, and we just all jolted out of our seats. And it was an eerie couple of seconds, and then we realized, okay, the flight crew is not able to give us guidance. I was actually sitting next to the emergency exit door, so I opened the emergency exit, let out passengers, let myself out. There was no slide since the flight crew wasn't able to set that up. So by the time I got out, an emergency personnel helped me jump off the wing of the plane.
That's incredible. So you actually opened the door because, obviously the pilots, in the horrible tragedy, had died. The flight attendant in the front that was strapped in is alive but had been ejected.
Yeah.
Right? That this was on you and others who were trying to get everyone out. So you talk about that boom and jolt. It happened very, very quickly when you think about how fast you're going, right? You're down a second or two, and then, but it sounds like you're saying you felt extra braking. You felt that they did, in those last milliseconds when they were aware something was happening, they did everything they could.
They did. I felt like the pilots saved our lives. I felt like their quick thinking and quick action braking slowed the impact and lessened what could have been an even bigger fatality. They're the heroes. I'm forever indebted to them. They're the reasons I was able to make it home safe to see my boys. And my heart goes out to their families. They're in my thoughts and prayers. I've been crying all day about them.
And we just, I know you said Antoine Foray was the first time you've seen.
Yeah.
And he was a young pilot, and you could see the pride he had in his work in that image. But you were saying how odd it is. When you're sitting on the plane, you hadn't seen the pilots, of course.
Right.
You wouldn't you didn't even know who they were. It just would have been a disembodied voice. But now
I get to put
the
a
feeling
face.
of that they gave up their lives to try to save everybody else's.
Yeah, they're the unsung heroes in this, and I'm forever grateful that they were quick and tried to slow down as much as they could so that the impact wasn't as large.
The surveillance video shows that moment of impact, and I know you're on the inside, so you felt it, and you felt what that timing felt like in real time as a human being on board. But when you watch that, I mean, how does it feel different watching that image from the outside versus where you were actually on the inside?
Watching it from the outside, I almost feel like I'm bracing myself for the impact again, because I had just seen that perspective of the plane and the fire truck colliding. I have not been privy to the footage yet because I've been trying to get rest, which I've not been able to do.
No.
And so seeing the footage for the first time today is just as scary as experiencing it.